Morning, everyone. If you would, go ahead and start making your way to your seats. I'm doing a short introduction of our speaker this morning. It's a man I've known for over 20 years now. We've been supporting him here at St. Augustine for the last year. I won't go into the work. He'll tell you about the work, but it's been overseas and here in the U.S. Josh Blackmer, go ahead and come tell us. He told me to keep it short.
We have a lot of pictures to get through, so we need the time. But it is exciting to be with you all and talk about the work that we've been doing and the part that you all have been playing. When we start talking about this work, I'll use the word we, and that includes all of us here. It includes this congregation. You are a part of the work. As Paul talked to the church in Philippi, he said that the things that he was doing were to their account. And so likewise, this is a work that we are doing together, and we appreciate you all's support and being involved in this work. Cam mentioned that we do have some things we do overseas, but primarily what we do is here in the States, working with small, isolated congregations of the Lord's Church around the United States. So we're excited to talk to you about what we've been doing this past year. As we go through these slides, we'll have just talking about, in order what we did this year, and hopefully there'll be time at the end for questions. This is a Bible class. We can talk and talk about the work. So if you have questions about any of these things, or if you want more clarity on different things, please ask questions, and we'll have time for that. So let's begin with a word of prayer as we get into class this morning. Our Father in heaven, we thank you so much for this time, and we thank you for your blessings and watching over us. We thank you for what you've done, that we can be called your children. Thank you so much. Your son's name we pray. Amen. All right, so answering Macedonian calls, you have to give a thing a name, and this is the name, working with Palm Beach Lake Church of Christ down in Palm Beach County. We've been working with them since 2004 in various roles. We've worked with them with their youth. We were their missionary to Asunción, Paraguay for 5 years, and then we came back and we're working with their youth again. When our children moved out, went to college, we decided, hey, we want to get back in the mission field. And our elders said, would you do domestic mission work? And we're like, yeah, we could do that. And they said, well, we don't know what that looks like or how that's going to go. You guys put something together and then come back and let us know what a format that might be. And so we started praying about it and thinking about it. And then we kind of took a page out of, well, my grandfather was a preacher for a long time, and he did something similar to this in the 90s, that they sold their home and moved in an RV and worked with congregations in the Northwest. And so we decided to take a page out of his playbook and do something similar. So that's kind of how this got started. But I guess last year, we went to Easter Island, Chile. This is a work that we started in 2010. And we've been going there once a year, initially twice a year, but in these past few years, just once a year, and working with the church there. There was not a congregation of the Lord's Church on Easter Island. We went, and when we first started going, our practice was just to offer people to study, would like to study the Bible, and so we've got some Bible studies that way. We also went around to different religious groups, and we talked to people on the island and say, is there a group here that just follows the Bible? And because I'm a firm believer in that the Word of God does not come back void, and that if people that are honest hearts on the island that are reading Scripture, the church could be there. We just didn't know. We don't know much about Easter Island, so we were looking initially to see if that was the case. And we would go and visit places of worship, as Paul did, and see if there were those that were there that are following just the Word of God. And when you come and visit in those places, especially, here's this gringo coming in with them, and they want you to witness or stand up and speak. And I was like, yes, I will definitely stand up and speak. And so they'd get a mini gospel sermon, and then typically I would have the pastor pull me aside after and talk about things. So we didn't find a group that was following the Bible, but we did get to kind of at least spread the word, what we were doing there on the island. So as a practice, I always have somebody come with me, and as of late, there have been members of the church in Santiago that have been going with me over. Santiago is the capital city of Chile. Easter Island is a island. It's basically Chile's Hawaii, that puts things in perspective for us. But they're famous for their statues, the Moai statues, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of propaganda about those. So here's the group. This is a Wednesday night Bible study in Santiago, and I was teaching the Bible class there before I went over. There's a great group of congregations there in Santiago. What they do for mission work in Chile is they all come together and worship together on every fifth Sunday, and the contribution that's made on those fifth Sundays goes towards mission work, and they have guys that are prepared to be sent all over Chile. And so one of those guys goes with me when I head over to Easter Island. And so here in this picture, you see Raul there beside me. Raul is from Venezuela, but he's been in Chile for a long time and working with the church. Really neat guy. And then on the other side of the table, you'll see Uri, a young man, and then his wife, Andrea. You'll see a lot of peace signs and thumbs up in these pictures. They just love doing that. I don't know why. Whenever you're about to take a picture, peace sign. Okay, so that's just a thing they do there. But Uri and Andrea are kind of the backbone of the congregation there. There's 4 members of the congregation, so they're 50% of the congregation also. But when Uri was a second baptism on the island, and when I was baptizing him, I was also teaching him how to baptize other people and how to do that. And he baptized his wife later on, a few years later. And so I'm excited about what they're doing. They're very involved, very in work. And then you'll see Piki there in the forefront with her peace sign, and Raul there as we're studying. We sit around a table and study the Bible a lot while we're there. So we're just pulling together people we can study with and spreading the word out that way. And of course, we have we've been going so frequently to the island. We have contacts and different things that we touch base with when we're there and follow up with some of the long-term studies. Not everybody is like study the Bible once and is baptized. You know that. You've worked with people for years, I'm sure. And so some people take longer, so we're still doing that with some other people. Piki was an interesting case in that we were there, I think it was May of 2013, and so tourism is the main thing on Easter Island as far as income is concerned, and Piki sells things. She makes a lot of things and sells them to the tourists. And we were at her booth, and Kara asked her if she would like to study the Bible, and she said, "How can I say no if God has brought the Word to my door?" Which is not an answer you get very often. And so we studied with her that first night, and there were just tears coming down her cheeks because she said, "I've never studied the Bible this way. I've never just systematically studied the Bible and had somebody open it up to her." And though she's been religious and she's been at various groups, but they don't study the Bible that way. They don't just teach what Scripture says, and so she was excited about that. This is China, and they have a lot of nicknames for each other, and that is not her given name, not her Christian name, but it is her nickname, what she goes by. And we asked her the same question if she'd like to study the Bible. She was there selling things, and she said sure. So we sat down, a cup of coffee, and studied the Bible with her while we were there. More Bible studies. This is the church. This Sunday we're having worship together, and it's again just around the table. And incidentally, on Sundays I usually Zoom Bible study with them so that we continue that connection while I'm gone, so they continue growing, continue being educated, and encouraging them. This is as I was getting ready to leave. More of Piki's children and friends were there as we were getting ready to leave. They do different. We'll talk a little bit about this kind as we go through different places. But culturally, food-wise, their big meal is during lunch, and they have what they call it once, which would translate to elevensies at night before they go to bed. And so that's kind of before we got ready to leave. We went to Matanzas, Cuba. Also, we've been there a couple of times, and went with Brother Cash and Gary Dull on this trip. Incidentally, Gary had to go back. He had some medical situation arise and had to go back. I was there to translate, and so once they went back, the translating got really easy. Right, I didn't have to really do any translating, but the work in Cuba is interesting. There are a lot of congregations in Cuba, a lot of Christians in Cuba. And for us to go into Cuba and work, you can't just go on a tourist visa. If you go on a tourist visa, you can only stay in government-approved hostels. You can only use government-approved transportation. You cannot speak, teach in any capacity. You can worship, but you can't teach in any way. So we contact, the government requires that they have a president of the church in that area, a representative, and then, or at least for the country, and then in every area there's a representative. And so we work through them to get a religious visa so we can go in and teach and preach and be able to do that. And they take care of all that for us, and we have not had any issues when we go into Cuba. And the government, as long as you play by the rules and do what they say, then everything is fine. And we'll talk a bit more about that, how that has actually helped the church in this area. People helped them purchase about, I want to say about 40 acres of property and to cultivate. So they saw a need. It's a very, very poor country. People, and there are a lot of needs as far as just basic needs of food. And so the church has, and the members help plant food and crops and things of that nature in order to give to the members and to give to others in the area and help supply that need. And so we go. Gary has a background in agriculture, and so he goes in to help kind of teach them different things to have more productive. And incidentally, one of the things that helped the church is because they were obeying the laws and because they were doing things the right way, and the government saw what they were doing, they actually gave them more land that were next door to this property. And so they have much more land now to be able to cultivate. And the church is the only group that's allowed to go into the orphanage and to go into the folks' home and bring them food. We were delivering food while we were there, went into the orphanage, and there was nothing in the pantries. And we were bringing the only food they had at that time. And things were kind of rough. And so here, the time we were there, they were growing tomatoes, and they process those, cook them up, and make puree, and add that to the rice or whatever other food they have, just to give them a little more nutrients. Is a farmer, a preacher, a mechanic. You wear a lot of hats when you're in Cuba, and so he does everything. And he'll preach up to 8 times on a Sunday. And so preachers that are there, they travel around to different groups to preach. Not everybody can come to the main congregation in a town because of transportation issues and the cost of getting there. And so the preachers go to different groups, and we'll talk about that when we get to some other places as well. This is something that the government also gave to the church, gave them a bus. It didn't look this good. They've painted it and kind of started restoring it. But again, because of what the church was doing, they always asked us to bring in bottles of these calcium pills when we were coming, and we didn't know why, but we were bringing them in, and then they would disappear. They'd go where they needed to go. And what they were doing is they were taking these and giving them to one of the government officials for her son. And because the church had been doing that, supplying that for her for so long, she was instrumental in giving them this bus. So doing good can turn around and do good for you as well. But the bus needed some work. Brother Cash is here, and he's putting in fuses. We brought them fuses. They were just using, copper wire as a fuse, which works, but it's not the best. So it's hard to come by those kind of things there. So we'll bring those in when we come. And you've seen all the old cars and that kind of stuff. But what you don't see inside those cars, those motors have long since been used up. And they're now typically have Isuzu diesel engines in them and things like that, just to keep them running. But they're really proud about their cars. They're like, this is all original, those kind of discussions, except for the motor, right? So it's neat. So we went from there over to Colón, which is in the Matanzas, the state of Matanzas. And in Cuba, you have to have a house church. If you had a building prior to the revolution and were able to get it back after the revolution, then you could use that church building. But anything after the revolution has to be in a house church. And so you can't put out signage of any kind. You can put up a sign just inside the door on Sundays, but you can't have any signage up. And so this is Orlando and Osalaida, his wife, and they work there in Cologne. He also preaches 5 times on Sunday, preaching here in this house church and then other communities outside of Cologne. And so we traveled around on the Sunday I was there, preaching and teaching in these communities. But you have people that walk for miles to come to these places, walk for miles to come and worship on Sundays. And the dedication they have, despite the circumstances, is really, really encouraging, especially when we think about here in the United States, we're not walking for miles to go to services, right? We might, anyway, so there's just the circumstances are very different, but they're very dedicated in serving God. And I see some other pictures, other groups that we went and worked with while we were there. Just really good people. This is they're in that building that we saw pictures of the outside earlier. And what you can't see in this picture is just off to the side is another room, and they're kind of looking in through a doorway. And so the house is full. It's another group that we went to worship. This is the farthest one out to get to. You'll see Orlando over one of my shoulders. They don't do selfies very well there, so it was a struggle. But the other brother there baptized on the previous trip, and he was in his 80s, and we always go to visit him and encourage him. And visiting him is, you go to encourage, but it's one of those things where you leave feeling more encouraged maybe than what you were doing. It was really neat to talk about him, his life, and the things that he's been through, and just the dedication and the reliance on God despite circumstances. This is a Bible study we did during the week with a family. There's another family we did a Bible study with. We had a couple baptisms from this Bible study. But everybody in the household came to be a part of that Bible study. They want to know what's going on and hear about the Word of God. It was very encouraging. This is a man who's a little bit more well off, but Orlando's been studying with him in a situation where he just wants to know more about the Bible, and so we're sharing the Bible with him. And kind of one of those more prolonged Bible studies that are. So here's some of the baptisms that took place, and that's the baptism. It takes a long time to fill that up. The water pressure is not great, and so it took several days to get it to where it was about knee high there. And we'll see a picture in a moment of another baptism that took place. The baptistry wasn't full, so we had to go out to the reservoir and walk way out in the water to baptize a lady there. But so we had this baptism and then a Bible study there. This is the back kind of patio area of that house, of the church there. And this is that baptism out in the reservoir. Like I said, I had to walk a ways out there to get deep enough water. I was about up to mid-calf in mud, so that helped a little bit. Then we went to Asunción, Paraguay, and we know Paraguay really well. We lived there for 5 years, and so we continue to go back. And there are no American missionaries there. There are 3 congregations of the Lord's Church in Paraguay. Paraguay is a small country about the size of California, and the population almost 8 million, around 8 million people. Small when you think about South American countries. You'll have towns, cities in Brazil and Chile that are over 20 million people, and so forth. Paraguay is very small, and like I said, only 3 congregations of the Lord's Church in Paraguay, which is not many. There's not. It's not a big tourist attraction. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere as far as South. Of working with the people there. Our first Sunday there, they had all the congregations came together on the farm of one of the members. We had an all-day kind of various sermons and Bible classes, things like that, and worship together. And what's neat now, since we've been going there so long, 2009 was when we started, the young men that were in, that were high school at the time now have their own families and are preaching and teaching class and being leaders in the congregation, so that's really encouraging to see that growth. And again, just preaching. This is the Sacramento that we primarily worked with while we were there. And then there's a church plant that started a few years back in another part of town, and we went to teach there as well and work with the congregation. That's the congregation there, with some visitors. We also spent time with the preacher and his wife. Ecuador, they're working there and encourage them. And so in Paraguay, they have lunch as a big meal, but if you get invited over for dinner to somebody's house, you're going to show up maybe 9 o'clock, and if they do a barbecue, so beef industry is big in Paraguay. Even everybody eats beef in Paraguay, and so charcoal barbecue grills that's the thing to do if you're having guests over. And so you show up at night, and that's when they start the grill. And so you can imagine how long it's going to take. So you'll be at somebody's house past midnight, typically, if you're over at somebody's house. If you enjoy their company, right? You might find a way to excuse yourself sooner than that. But so you're there a while. So they have merienda, an afternoon snack, to get to those late evening meals. And so we're enjoying that time with them. Let's see here. So like I mentioned before, we typically try and do our out-of-country travel in January, February, or March. Just because if you're living in an RV full-time, those months are not really great months to be living in an RV out on the road, because it's rather frigid, and it's expensive to be down here in Florida during those months, because everybody wants to be down here in Florida. You understand that. And so we use that time to go out. So we came back from there and went out to Salmon, Idaho. I'm from Idaho originally, and we had contact there in Salmon, and so we were there till April to June and made our trek out that way. Some of you might have driven across the country. It takes a lot to do that. We did go through Albuquerque, went through there, and some of you get the reference. This is Salmon, Idaho, and it's in a valley there, kind of a high mountain valley, and it's a population in the valley about 5,000, in the town 3,100, and it's 3 hours from Walmart. It's 3 hours from the nearest congregation, and if they do have a grocery store in town, but it's expensive because everything has to get shipped in there. So when they go buy groceries, they go over 7,000 foot pass over into Montana or down into another town in Idaho. Again, 3 hours away. It's a geographical oddity that way, but they have to go those places to get their groceries for the month to bring them in. And so, especially in the winter months when those passes can be treacherous, this is in June. Difference from Paraguay. We came from Paraguay at 115 degrees to Idaho, and it was, still chilly in April. This is the congregation, Bryan Avenue congregation, that we worked with. They didn't have their preacher has retired. Got there, they found out that the preacher's wife's cancer had returned, and they had to go into Boise, and we didn't get to see them much. But so our focus in working with the congregation there, and kind of our focus anywhere we go, is to kind of fill the needs that they have. We don't go into a congregation and say, hey, we're going to do this, 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 and this, like we have a brown bag full of all the answers. We go in and kind of say, what do you need? What do you need us to do? What are things that we can help with? And in this case, we were preaching, or I was preaching, and they had men there to teach the class. They didn't want to, stop that process. They already had that in play. And so we would preach and then also volunteer in the community, because in these small communities, it takes a little while to kind of break into a community and get to know anybody. And you're the outsider, especially if you're driving around town with Florida license plates. You're an outsider, and so it takes a minute to kind of break into that community. So that was bring meals and various things in the community. Another thing that we did was just getting to know the members and encourage them. It's always nice to have somebody come in and say, oh, you're doing good things. These are the things you're doing right, and kind of build them up, encourage them. And so we spend a lot of time with the members. They have a congregational camping trip that they do, different activities we do with them. One of the brothers is a farrier, and he's in the Cowboy Hall of Fame for his artwork and stuff like that. And so he's kind of like a Renaissance man when it comes to that kind of stuff. But so I got to go around with him and do some of that, and we're just encouraging them and building them up, and saying you're doing good. The another element is having groups come in, and that's something that congregations that are supporting the work, we encourage you guys to come and see what's going on out there. If you have a free weekend and you want to come out west or wherever we are, we encourage you to do that. And it's they don't get to see Christians from out of the valley very often, and so it's encouraging to them to have Palm Beach Lakes, and encourage them and get some stuff done. One of the things that they needed some help with was pouring this sidewalk. So it snows there, right? I know it's not something we're familiar with here in Florida, but when you come to church, your Sunday go-to-meeting shoes are not the best snowshoes. I don't know if you know that much about, but it's rather slick. And so for some of the older members, they needed the sidewalk to be able to park there and walk in on a sidewalk. And so we were able to help them get that done one day. We also were handing out flyers. And so there door knocking isn't something you want to do. Because of the Mormon influence out west, there were 2 Mormon church buildings in this town, and the town's so small. And they still had 2 more, so it's a big influence of the Mormon church. And a lot of the, their elders going around door knocking and things. So you don't want to do that, but we were hanging information on door handles and handing information out in the community. And what that does is let the community know that you're there if they forgot, that you're active and that you care about people and you're trying to get the word out. So we were doing that. So we handed out about 1,200 flyers in the community, which is a lot in a small community like that. So that was beneficial. And encouraging to the members. Afterwards, they were saying, we need to be doing this more. And so you kind of come in and example things that should be done. And when you leave, hopefully those are things that they continue to do. And that's part of what we're doing as well. And so it was encouraging for them to have that work. And again, the group going around with the members wanted to have us over for meals and things. So that was a fun time. Up in one of those corners, so there's a restaurant there called Savage Grill. It's a hamburger joint. It's world famous in Idaho for their 1-pound hamburgers. Now, this is not a 4-stack of quarter-pounder patties. This is a 1-pound patty on a burger, and the local bakery makes the buns for it. And so a couple of our guys said, hey, can we do a double patty 1-pounder? And everybody at the restaurant was like, that's never been done before, right? So they were taking pictures and calling the owner and letting them know. But they finished it. The father-son duo finished their own individual 2-pound hamburgers. So they got famous there in that town for that. So this is us on the Sunday. We're getting ready to leave. So I preached, and then we got on the road. What I didn't mention before, you saw the picture of everybody around the walls. They have a potluck every Sunday there. Every Sunday they have potluck, which some of your ladies are like, that's a lot of food, right? But they travel, some of them travel so far to get there because there aren't any, really close congregations. That's help to them to be able to come together, have a meal, and then they'll go home. They don't have evening services. And so it's something for them to stay connected and make it easier for those who are traveling a long distance. And so we got on the road that Sunday and started heading back down to Florida. Part of an overlap, and Kara and I were, and Cam works with us on this, is Central Florida Bible Camp and directing a couple of weeks there. And so this is kind of a holdover from what we were doing before. And we're preparing other guys to kind of step up into this role. And next year will be I'm sorry, I keep saying next year. This is now that we're this year. So this year will be our last time at Central Florida Bible Camp, but it's kind of a holdover work. And making our way back down, try to go a different way. You ever get tired of traveling the same roads? Yeah, so we try to find a different way down, and there we are in our camp merch that Cam puts together for us. We had, it was about 120 kids, I think, a couple baptisms this week, and it was a good group. It's interesting, the week that we had was an outreach, and it's been encouraging. A challenge, but encouraging as well. So, from there we go to Cherokee, North Carolina, August, September, October, a short trip, comparatively speaking. This is the building there. This is on the reservation of the Eastern Band of the Cherokee peoples, and the church rents this or leases the property from the tribe. You can't, if you're not part of the tribe, you can't own any of the property. And so the church has been there, I think, from the 50s, and it's ebbed and flowed in its size. It got down to about 3 members, about back up to about 15 members now. Several members of the tribe are members of the congregation there. And our focus here was working with the leadership. There were 2 men that were worshiping there and kind of encouraging them to step up and fill the role of leadership and kind of what that looks like, best practices, kind of working with them on that. We also do some work around the building. We ended up pouring, and I wasn't lead project on this. If you guys do concrete work and you're looking at that, like what? I wasn't lead on this. I was just doing what I was told. But I don't know why it is. Every place we've been this last year, we did some concrete work. That's not on my card. I don't say, hey, I don't advertise concrete work, but that's just what. We had there's a lot of rain that took place while we were up there, and flooded. This door always gets flooded, and so this was to help kind of stem that. Also cleaning up the parsonage. They have a house there. There's a possibility that they're going to be having a preacher come soon, and so we're getting that ready for them. And cleaning out the building. This is a work that a lot of people have been donating to in different ways and giving them things, and they haven't been able to say no. Have you ever been in a situation like that? People want to give you something, and it's hard to say, no, we really don't need that. So they haven't had people to say no, and so they had rooms full of stuff that have been donated that really just need to be gone through, and a lot of it thrown away. I found in the plastic still, when we were cleaning out the preacher's office, 5, which, if you know anything about windows, that's kind of old, right? It's almost museum quality. So there's a lot that we need to get rid of. We hauled a lot to the dump from in our truck when we were working there with them. But again, you're just finding different ways. We also were writing articles in the local newspaper and doing those kind of things to get the word out as well. And so just filling the needs that are there and helping the congregation teach it. We were teaching and preaching and those kind of things also. We like to get kind of involved in the culture wherever we go. You can learn a lot about people and learn a lot about how to talk to people about their culture and those kind of things. So they have Cherokee Week where they have teams of stickball. How many of you have seen Dances with Wolves when they played stickball in that movie? Maybe you have. That was stickball. The real stickball. They actually have a team come from Oklahoma, from the Western Band of the Cherokee. It's like lacrosse mixed with MMA and some other things. There's very few rules, and it is really, really rough. A lot of things get broken. Guys are coming off the field, relocating fingers and things like that. What you don't see is there's an ambulance kind of just outside of this picture, just in case things get really bad. But there are a lot of injuries. And one of the men of the congregation actually plays on one of the teams there. So they were called the Hummingbirds, which was ironic, but that was their team. So we're there to see those kind of events also. We also went out to support some of the youth that were in the marching band and went to their football games. And we went out to support and cheer on the Swain County Devils, which was ironic given while we were there to cheer on the Devils. But again, just finding ways to encourage the brethren, encourage those that don't get a lot of attention all the time, and be with them in the different ways and different parts of their lives. So you've heard a little bit about North Carolina recently in the news as far as the devastation that took place because of the hurricane. We actually, it didn't affect us too much in that we were kind of west of where all the main destruction was taking place or had taken place. We did have to evacuate. Where we were parked was just a little island, a little RV park there. It had one bridge off and on the island. And I was sitting there outside the RV, my own business, and a guy comes up in a golf cart and said, "I guess you didn't hear." I said, "I guess not. I don't know what you're talking about." He said, "Well, right now it's voluntary evacuation, but the council has, the chiefly council has decided that they're going to mandate evacuation from this area." And so we did have to, I had to evacuate for one night. Kara was out of country. She works with a group that she counsels on the internet, via the internet, and works with mission teams, Spanish-speaking mission teams. And she was in Costa Rica at the time working with the ladies down there. And so she was supposed to fly back into Asheville after all this happened. That did not happen. And she said, "Well, I can fly to Knoxville and you can come get me." I said, "Well, I can't actually because they've closed the roads down. Everything's closed. I can't get out of here." So she ended up flying to Nashville, staying with family there, and able to get in a week later when our kids came to visit. So this area, the Cherokee area, wasn't affected too much. We got a lot of rain. And you can see here the creek, flood stage. It didn't flood, but get back. Cherokee became a point where they were using Cherokee as a staging point for a lot of resources. And for weeks afterwards, they were flying telephone poles via helicopter in and out of Cherokee, and getting up in the mountains and things. So using it that way. And the church in Asheville became a hub for the Churches of Christ disaster relief. There were a lot of trailers were hauled into Asheville. So a lot of work happened that way. Looking forward for this year, I get to say that now. These are the places we'll be this year. We're going to be going into Asuncion. We won't be going to Cuba this year. And we'll go to Asuncion for 8 weeks and be down there, kind of doing what we do here in the States, but in Asuncion. When we go there, it's like going home. You know, we speak the language, we know the culture, we know a lot of people there, so it's easy for us to do that. And then we'll make a trip from Asuncion out to Easter Island as well while we're there. When we get back, we'll get everything ready and head up to Glendive, Montana, which is eastern Montana, over towards the Dakotas, and working with the congregation there. It's about a 15-member congregation. We'll come back to Central Florida Bible Camp and then head over to Littleton, New Hampshire for August, part of October. And they closed down all the campgrounds and everything up there mid-October, so we'll stay as long as we can. There's a church plant that started in Littleton, New Hampshire. Wayne Berger, who was one of the teachers out of the Bear Valley School of Preaching, they had to leave that area for health reasons, and so they went to Littleton, New Hampshire and started to work there. And so we'll be joining them and working with them in that area. And then coming down and reporting and spending time with Palm Beach Lakes and letting people know more about the work. So that's our look forward to what's happening, again, all over the place, but something that we are doing together, and we appreciate y'all's involvement in that. We do have time for questions if anybody has any questions, thoughts? Yes, sir.
How do congregations find out about the work, and how do you make those contacts? How do you get those?
Excellent. So how do people find out about the work, and how do we make those contacts? Well, it's by word of mouth. The congregations that are supporting us, they might know of a place, hey, you should go. We like working through things that way because that gives an idea of we can ask questions about the congregation. We don't want to go in a situation where we show up and there's a piano, right? And it's like, oh, well, I guess lesson number 1 is going to be, right? So we're kind of on the same page that way and get a little background about the work. In the case of Glendive, there's a brother in the church who lives in Montana, but he travels around to all these congregations on Sundays. He doesn't go to just one place. And so he knew a lot about the congregations in that area, and he told us about the church in Glendive. And so we got in touch with them that way. In Littleton, New Hampshire, it's been surprising. We've run into a lot of people that knew about the work in Littleton, and congregation supports that work as well. And so that's kind of how we got in touch with the Littleton situation. But what we do is we contact these congregations, contact these groups, kind of talk to them about the possibility of being there, and then we put together a schedule for the year, and then I present that to the elders at Palm Beach Lakes and say, hey, here's the possibility of this year. What do you all think? And we talk about it, and they kind of give their stamp of approval. So that's kind of the process and how we do that. And it's worked out well so far. Right now, we're scheduled out till spring of 26 right now. So we're looking to fill up our 26 calendar year right now. Yes, sir. No, there's no restrictions of any kind of movement in Paraguay. It's really easy to get in there, and you don't even have to have a visa to get there or anything. And so that makes it really easy to work in Paraguay. The only restriction, I guess, would be that once you get outside of big city areas, they speak two languages. They have two national languages, and they speak more of the Guarani, the Indian dialect, in the other parts. They actually mix that with their Spanish, which is fun sometimes. But so that might be, as far as outsiders coming in, that might be a little language barrier there. It's not strictly Spanish, but other than that, there's no real restrictions of any kind. Very good question. Any other questions? Yes. After we handed out the flyers in Idaho, we did not have a ton of visitors come, at least right away. There were some contacts that were made, and a few. There's a Bible study I was doing with one of the contacts from that, but not a lot of visitors initially. In small communities, it can be a challenge because everybody thinks they know everything about everybody, and so that is a challenge. There had been in the distant past where the congregation, the preacher there wasn't doing what he should have been doing, and that kind of put a sour taste in the Salmon, Idaho Church of Christ, and they rebranded and that kind of stuff to kind of get away from that image. But it takes a little bit in the small communities to kind of break into that. So we had, like I said, that one Bible study, but not a lot of visitors from that. So, yes, ma'am.
What kind of transportation do you have out of the country? You have your van here, you'll be moving home here, but when you travel, how do you?
When we travel out of the country, yes, we park the RV and get it winterized. There's actually, my parents live in Benton, Arkansas, just south of Little Rock, and so it's there right now, and that's a great jumping off point. Get on 40 and go. And so we leave it parked there, and then we just fly down there, and then we'll be renting an Airbnb while we're in Paraguay and staying that way. When we go for the short 2-week kind of trips, we'll stay with members of the church and that kind of thing. But since we'll be there longer, we'll have our own place to be. But yeah, so we were able to fly down to those places. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
That's
Okay.
Central Florida.
Oh, okay.
And
I'm sorry, I didn't know.
No, it's okay. It was a lads to dads.
Yes. Yeah.
Are you still doing that?
I'm not still doing that. We did that for several years.
Yes.
There's another brother that's taken that over. Michael Hartman has taken that over. And that was actually interesting. The Lads to Dads is kind of a father-son kind of thing at Central Florida Bible Camp. I believe it was in April. I don't remember if I remember correctly. And we actually had a ton of like a Baptist group of Russian and Ukrainian people coming. So it became an outreach kind of thing. There was one year, Michael Hartman has been involved in it, and he came in and had his airboat out on the pond and there at camp and gave the kids headlamps and gigs for frog gigging, which is the closest thing. All those kids running around with their Ukrainian accents, gigging frogs and stuff is like Lord of the Flies a little bit, but Anyways, it was kind of fun, but I haven't continued doing that. So July is, we have a week, we do fifth session week, Forever Camp. And this year our theme is Forever United. And so we do 1 week with that, and then we do another half-week session of Upward Bound, which is more of like an adventure camp, where with Upward Bound we have kids come in, we put them into family groups, and we have some college-age kids that are the parents in the family group, and we have them go through different, we have some teaching up front, sometimes doing psychological profiles so they can see kind of how they interact in a group and how they work with people, and they take that information and we put them in stressful situations where they have certain projects they have to do or certain things they have to complete as a team, and then we see how that plays out and kind of help them grow in that area as far as being aware of themselves and being aware of how to interact as Christians and things, and then also do some work around the camp.
And is it successful?
So as far as the adventure camp, we've been doing that for probably almost 10 years now, for a long time, and it's been very, very good. So it's not a huge camp. I think we have typically 30 to 40 kids, but it's older kids, and it's kids that want to be there for that particular reason, and it's been very, very beneficial to have the kids being involved in that, because it's much more involved. Have you ever done any kind of team building kind of things or things of that nature? So we're doing that with the kids, and it's been very, very beneficial for them. And so if you have kids that are, I think it's 13, 14, and 18 is the kind of the age bracket for that. If you have kids that are in that age bracket, I really, really encourage you guys to send them to that. It's very, very beneficial. But that's actually, there's a preacher at the Pleasant Grove Road, Bill Weaver, is the one that kind of started that, and he's the main director of that. So, any other or questions? Anything? All right. What's our cutoff? Have we reached our point there, Cam? We're at it? Okay. Well, I appreciate y'all's involvement in this work. It is encouraging to come visit you guys, not just because Cam and Holly are awesome, but this congregation's been very supportive. I get texts from Les all the time, hey, how are things going? You guys are plugged in with this work, and we really appreciate you all and are very thankful for your part in what we're doing. Let's close with a prayer.